Shalom and welcome to our class in the Wisdom of King Solomon, the Hebrew book of Mishlei, known in English as Proverbs. We are restarting a series of classes that I started actually a couple of years ago, and it originated as a live stream where people would participate in the class. And for a bunch of reasons, it got sidetracked, and we got about 4 chapters into the book of Mishlei and never continued. And now I thought it was a good time to complete the project and finish the book of Mishlei. But instead of doing it as a live stream, I'm doing it here as pre-recorded videos. So if you like this kind of content, the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, reading, translating, and explaining, don't forget to follow and the follow button, subscribe, to get more content like this. Let's get started. So let me tell you how this class starts for those who are joining for the first time. What we're going to do is we're going to have here the Hebrew text of Mishlei up on the screen. And for those who know how to read Hebrew, you can read along, and this will also help you to make sure you've got the pronunciation correct. And then I'm going to read each verse and then translate, and here and there add a little commentary to help you understand the meaning of the text. And most of the explanation that I will give is based on the classic Hebrew commentators like Rashi and Mitsudot and others. So let's get started. So we're in chapter 5, verse 1. And this whole chapter is essentially King Solomon giving a parable, a sort of metaphor. The metaphor that he's using is a man who is drawn astray after women other than his wife. And he's warning, it's like a father warning his son, don't fall into that trap, because it may seem appealing to you right now, but eventually you will see that it will be your downfall. And the lesson that he's teaching, the subject of the metaphor, is actually a metaphor for the Jewish people, and their wife, let's say, that they should be engaged with is the Torah, and the foreign woman or the strange woman that they might be drawn astray after are all kinds of religions, philosophies, paganism, and other things that could draw someone astray from the Torah. And so King Solomon is using the metaphor of this woman who the person is attracted to teach us the lesson regarding staying faithful to the Torah. So let's start with chapter 5, verse 1. Beni l'chokhmati hakshiva, l'tfunati hat oznecha. So, Beni, my son, l'chokhmati, to my wisdom, hakshiva, listen, l'tfunati, to my understanding, hat oznecha. Verse 2. Lishmor mezimot V'dat svatecha yinsoru. Lishmor, to keep, to protect. Mezimot. Mezima in Hebrew, I don't know what's the best singular word to translate it to, but someone who has mezima is someone who knows the right thing to do and the right in any given situation. It's somebody who has good ideas about things. So lishmor mezima is essentially saying to keep your sharpness, right? V'dat, and knowledge, svatecha, your lips, yinsoru, will keep. Verse 3. Ki nofet titofna sifte zara v'chalak mishemen tika. Ki, because, nofet is like honey or something sweet. Titofna, they drip. Sifte zara, the lips of the foreign woman. Zara, in Hebrew, zar is the masculine word for someone who is a foreigner, and zara would be the feminine form, in other words, a foreign woman. The chalak mishemen hika. The chalak, and smoother, mishemen, than oil, hika is her palate. In other words, you see this foreign woman, and she seems attractive, her lips, her kiss, so to speak, and it's smoother than oil and and it's dripping honey. But he's going to say, don't fall for it. In verse 4, V'acharita mara chala'ana chada kecherev piot. V'acharita, and her end. In other words, in the beginning it seems sweet, but in the end, mara, it is bitter. Chala'ana, la'ana is a type of bitter herb. Chada, it's sharp, kecherev, as a sword, piot, of mouths, which means a double-edged sword, in other words. When the Tanakh wants to say a two-edged sword, it calls it cherev piot, or cherev pifiot, a sword with two mouths, two edges. Verse 5, Ragleha yordot mavet, Sha'ol tza'adea yitmochu. Ragleha, her legs, yordot, they descend, mavet, to death. Sha'ol is the place where the dead people go in the Tanakh. Tza'adeha, her steps, yitmochu, support. In other words, her legs, which may seem beautiful to you and attractive to you, they actually go down to Sheol. They lead you to death, and even her footsteps are supporting Sheol, so to speak. They're propping it up. Verse 6, Orach Chaim pen tifales, na'u ma'agloteha lo teda. Orach, the path, Chaim, of life, pen tifales, if you do not straighten it. The word tifales, to straighten, it means to straighten, to get something level. So, for example, in modern Hebrew, actually a level that builders use is called peles. Na'u magloteha. Na'u means to move, to wander. Magloteha, her circuitous wandering, from the word agol, which means a circle. Lo teda, you will not know. In other words, he's admonishing his son that you better either get yourself straight and on the straight path, or else where she can cause you to wander with her circuitous temptations, nobody knows. Lo teda, you won't know it. Ve'ata, this is verse 7. Ve'ata vanim shimu li, va'al tasuru mi'imre fi. Ve'ata, and now. Not like ata with an aleph, which would mean you. Ata with an I means now. And now, vanim, sons, children. Shimu li, listen to me. Ve'al tasuru, do not stray, do not turn away. Me'imre fi, from the words of my mouth. Verse 8. Harchet me'aleha darkecha ve'al tikrav el petach veta. Harchek, distance me'aleha, from her, darkecha, your path, ve'al tikrav, and do not draw near, el petach veta, to the door of her house. In other words, stay far, far away. Pen titen la'acherim hodecha ushnotecha la'achzarim. This is verse 9. Pen, lest titen, you will give, la'acherim, to others, hodecha, your glory, hod is glory, ushnotecha, and give your years, in other words, your time, la'achzari, to a cruel one. Verse 10. Pen yizba'u zarim kochecha va'atzavecha bevet nochri. Lest ispa'u, they will become satiated, zarim, foreigners, kochecha, from your energy, va'atzavecha, and your work, bevet nochri, will be in the house of a foreign person. In other words, if you get caught up with this strange woman, other than your wife, instead of investing your time, your energy, your gifts, and your attention into your wife, who will give you your children, give you your reputation, build your status in the community, all of that time and energy and money will go to other people that are not your family, and it will end up in someone else's house and not to your benefit. This is all, of course, a parable, and we'll talk more towards the end about the lesson of this parable. Verse 11, V'nohamta ba'acharitecha bechlot b'sarcha u'she'erecha. The word v'nahamta, nahamta means like to moan, okay? So you will moan out, ba'acharitecha, at your end. In other words, towards the end of your days, when you get older and you reflect, you will regret what you did. Bechlot b'sarcha, when you're, bechlot means when it is finished, when it is exhausted. B'sarcha, your flesh. U'she'erecha. The word she'erecha, according to most translators and commentators, is another word for flesh, but there are other slightly different translations. Verse 12, V'amarta, and you will say at that time, Ech saneti musar, how did I hate ethics or rebuke? V'tochachat na'atz libi, and reprimand, na'atz, despised, libi, my heart. I hated ethics, and my heart rejected or despised tochachat, rebuke. In other words, people who warned me or told me, don't do that, I laughed at them or I turned them away. So towards the end of your days, you'll say, how was I able to do that? Verse 13, Velo shamati bekol morai, velim lamdai lo hetiti ozni. This means, velo, and I didn't, shamati, listen, I didn't listen, bekol, to the voice, morai, of my teachers, velim lamdai, and to my teachers. You have here two words for a teacher, more and melamed. So morai are my teachers, it's a possessive. Velim lamdai is also my teachers, but two different words for a teacher. Lo hititi ozni, I didn't bend an ear. Why didn't I listen? Why didn't I bend my ear to those people who tried to teach me, who knew better than me? Verse 14. Kim'at hayiti bechol ra, betoch kahal ve'eda. Kimat, almost, hayiti, I was, bechol ra, in all bad, completely bad. Betoch, among, kahal ve'eda, the congregation and the assembly. In other words, you're going to say, I almost destroyed everything that I have, my relationships, my community, my reputation among people. And now he admonishes his son to stick to his own wife and his own family. Verse 15. Shete mai miborecha venozli mitoch be'erecha. Shete, drink, mayim, water, miborecha, from your sister, venozlim, and liquid, mitoch be'erecha, from inside your well. Here you have two Hebrew words which are very similar. You have bor and you have be'er. They both are a place where you draw water from, but bor is with a vav, is a cistern. A cistern basically collects rainwater. It was very common in biblical times for every home to have a cistern that collected rainwater during the rainy season, that you would draw the water throughout the year. And be'er with an aleph is a well where you basically dig down till you reach groundwater and draw the water. And so it's a more stable, reliable, let's say, source of water. So he says, drink the water from your cistern and the liquid from your own well. In other words, stick to your own wife. And if you do, in verse 16, he says, Yafutsu mainotecha chutza barchovot palge mayim. Yafutsu, they will spread out. Mainotecha, your well springs. Your springs, chutza, outside. Barchovot, and the streets, palge mayim, will be streams of water. In other words, he's saying, if you stick to your own wife and your own family and don't stray after others, then it may start that you're just drinking from a cistern. In other words, you feel like you have a limited source of water, a limited source of this connection, or even a well, which is maybe a little bit more. But ultimately, it will turn into a wellspring that will flow forward till it runs in the streets. In other words, it will be a source of abundant blessing for you. Verse 17, Yihiyu lecha levadecha ve'en lezarim itach. Yihiyu, they will be lecha, to you, levadecha, alone, ve'en, and there is not lezarim, to strange people, foreign people, itach, with you. In other words, you will have, when you stick to your own wife and your own family, you have something that belongs to you, and it's not something that belongs to anybody else. Yihi mekorcha varuch usmach me'eshet nurecha. He says, Yihi, let mekorcha, your source, your water source, be baruch, blessed. See it as a blessing. Usmach, and be happy, rejoice, me'eshet nurecha, from the wife of your youth. In other words, the woman who you married. Verse 19, Ayelet ahavim v'yalat chen dadeha iravucha b'chol et ba'ahavata tishke tamid. This is a little bit of a complicated verse. He says, Ayelet ahavim. This is a sort of idiom in Hebrew. It's based on the word ayala, and ayala is like a gazelle, and ahavim, of love, a gazelle of love. So this is a phrase that it sounds very poetic in Hebrew. It doesn't translate so well in English, but throughout the Bible, for example, if you look at Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, which is also written by Solomon, where there's a young man who's in love with a young woman and they're saying poetry back and forth to one another, often the man will call his beloved one like an ayala, like a gazelle, because it's a very graceful and beautiful animal. So he's saying your wife will be like ayelet ahavim, like a gazelle of love. And then he uses a parallel metaphor, v'ya'alat ten. Ya'alat, it's from Ya'el. Ya'el is an ibex. If you've ever been to En Gedi, you'll see them running around there, or in Mitzpeh Ramon in the Negev desert. We have a lot of them here in Israel. So King Solomon, in writing this, is inspired by the scenery that he saw around the land. And so he calls the wife not only a gazelle, but also like an ibex, which is a similarly graceful and beautiful animal. Yalat fen, a ibex of grace. Dadeha will be her love. Yiravucha b'chol et. Yiravucha, it's like to quench thirst. So it will quench your thirst b'chol et, at all times. Be'ahavata tishke tamid. You will constantly, ba'ahavata, in her love, tishke, you will delve, tamid, constantly. In other words, if you stick to your own wife, she will become more and more beloved to you. Verse 20. V'lama tishke v'ni v'zara utchabek chek nochria. V'lama, and why tishke should you go after v'ni, my son, b'zara, a foreign woman, utchabek, and embrace chek, the bosom, nochria, of a foreign woman. Verse 21, Ki nochach ene Adonai darkei ish v'chol ma'agalotav mefales. He, because, nochach, in the presence of ene Adonai, the eyes of God, darkei ish are the ways of man. In other words, God sees the ways of man. V'chol ma'agalotav, and all of his encirclings. Again, we had this word before, magalotav, from the word circle. Mifales, he straightens. Again, we had this word, mifales, like the level. So King Solomon, this wording sounds very poetic, but it's also very exact. He's saying that God is straight, and God wants us to be on a straight path. And we sometimes stray from that path and we start to go in circles. And God is constantly trying to push us back onto the straight path and straighten us. But we're going to see in the next verse that when we keep insisting on veering, that's what gets us into trouble. And that's where we're basically butting our head against the wall. Verse 22. Avonotav yilkeduno et harasha uvechavle chatato yitamech. Avonotav, his sins, yilkadunu, will ensnare him. Et harasha, the wicked man. In other words, the sins of the wicked man will ensnare him. Uvechavle chatato yitamech, and in the ropes, bechavle, ropes, chatato, of his sin, yitamech, he will be caught. Yitamech literally means to support, but in this sense, it means he'll be like hanging from the ropes or caught up like in the web of his own ropes. So what King Solomon is basically saying is, when a person sins, it's going to inevitably bring them to pain and suffering and difficulty. It's not because God is standing there waiting to get you back. It's not that God's saying, you sin, now I'm going to punish you, like a person who's mad at someone is going to take revenge. It's just like he said in the previous verse, that God is straight. He's mifales. He caused everything to be level. When we try to run around in circles, which essentially means we sin, we veer from the right path, then our own sin is what traps us, and the ropes that we spin essentially ensnare us. Verse 23, and this is the last verse of the chapter, and then we'll sum up what is the lesson from all of this. Hu yamut be'en musar uverov ivalto yishgeh. He, that is to say the wicked one, yamut, will die, be'en, when there is not musar, ethics, morals, uverov, and from the abundance, ivalto, of his folly, yishgeh, he will err. So we have here a chapter, 23 verses, where King Solomon is essentially talking about a man who falls for a woman other than his wife, and therefore he spends his time, his money, his energy investing in her, when that energy should have went into his own family, building up his reputation and building up his relationship and building up his house, and instead it's going elsewhere. But all of the classic commentaries understand this as a metaphor, as all of the book of Mishlei is, and also the other books of King Solomon, like Song of Songs. And the metaphor is essentially for the people of Israel and the Torah. Our wife, the one that we should be committed to, is the Torah, the teachings of God. By the way, Torah is a feminine word in Hebrew. So King Solomon is saying that we should dedicate our life to our teachings, to the teachings that God gave us, the teachings of Torah. And if we do, we will go deeper and deeper, and our love for Torah will grow. And maybe at first we'll feel limited that we can't invest our time in other foreign philosophies and the newest ideas, the newest political movements. You know, young people are always enthralled by the latest thing. They're always getting caught up by what seem to be new movements and new ideas. But of course, as King Solomon says in one of his other great books of wisdom, Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, he says, En chadash tachat shamesh. There's nothing new under the sun. Every bright, shiny idea that comes up already was, and maybe it was in the time of our parents or grandparents, maybe it was 2,000 years ago in the time of the Greeks, maybe it was 4,000 years ago in the time of the Egyptians, but there's nothing new that wasn't thought of. But of course, new people are born every day, and they don't know about all that, and it looks like it's more attractive to go to this movement or that movement, to this religion or that religion. What King Solomon is telling us is that we should stick to the straight path, the path of the Torah, path of God. And if we do, then our well springs will overflow. We won't only be limited, but it's not just the amount of water that we have will be limited, but actually it will grow and be unlimited. And of course, he uses the water here as a metaphor because our sages, the rabbis and the Talmud and elsewhere, are constantly comparing the Torah to water. They say, "Ein mayim ela Torah." There's no water other than Torah. Why is the Torah compared to water? Because just like water falls from the heavens in the rain, and it soaks down into the earth, and everything that it touches, it brings to life. And where there's no water, you have barren desert, and where there's lots of water, you have forests and farms and everything. So too, the Torah comes down from heaven. It brings it down. It comes down to the earth and allows us to connect to it here on the earth through the mitzvot, the commandments, and through the study of Torah. And you might think that if I stick only to the water of Torah, I'm limited. But no, King Solomon is telling us you can go deeper and deeper and deeper, and the love will grow and it will overflow. So that's the lesson of chapter 5. Stay tuned for chapter 6. Don't forget to follow, comment in the comments. Let me know what you think. And shalom from Israel. God bless you.